Geno Auriemma with another championship. How do you look at him perhaps differently now that he has 12 titles compared to Summitt's 8? I hate to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and share that I think that Geno Auriemma has proven that he has had more success than Pat Summitt. Now, obviously, that was because of her illness. She might still be coaching. Now, how old would she be right now?
How old would Pat Summitt be at this moment if she were still coaching? She would be...
I'll tell you what. I'll go ahead and fire 4 downs, and then you give me that.
Where do you stand? Hot or cold? Brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. 50 years in East Tennessee. CityHeatandAir.com. On Off the Hook Sports.
All right. So, hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Geno has more titles, more wins, better winning percentage. That means that he is a better coach. Hot means you agree. Cold means you do not. Hot or cold?
I do not agree that means he's a better coach. I think that argument, the more titles, more wins, and a better win percentage, I think that Geno, there are a lot of factors into why he had those, not the least of which was for most of Geno's career, he coached in a much easier conference because at the peak of this rivalry, the Big East was a significantly worse conference than the SEC during that time. This is not men's basketball where the Big East was dominant.
True.
And
you say more successful.
That's hot.
It has to be Geno. But we have to factor in what you brought up. Pat Summitt had an 8-7 lead in national championships before revealing her dementia diagnosis. Hot or cold? Hot, that's proof that Pat Summitt is a better coach between the two. Cold, it really doesn't hold water.
I'm hot on it because it's proof that it negates the Geno argument for his national titles. Because I'm going to go a step further here, guys. Pat Summitt led Geno 9-7 at the time of her dementia, revealing her dementia diagnosis, and also at the time of her stepping down. She led Geno 8-7. But Dave, I'm going to take it a step further in this. Anybody that knows what was going on within the program knows that Pat Summitt's dementia diagnosis she got dementia a few years before she actually revealed she had it.
Well, I know from people that covered her closely that the last year she was nowhere close to 100%. I can't speak to 2 years.
Well, the last year that was when she revealed it. She was sitting on the bench and Holly was basically running the show.
Well, not only that, but the interaction with the media, she used to be really dedicated for promoting the game. She talked to every reporter individually for 3 minutes, which is pretty unheard of in other sports. And that wasn't happening. She would talk in a group setting maybe once a week.
Yeah.
But even behind the scenes, there was some, she was not the head
There was some known decline in Pat Summitt starting in 2009. There were a couple, and just for those who don't remember the whole story, her last national title is 2008. 2009, there was known decline from some people who were close to her that have told some stories. She doesn't reveal her diagnosis until 2011. It is pretty much well established that her final 4 years of coaching, which were the final 4 years after she won a national title, they never made it back to the Final Four. She probably was coaching all 4 years with dementia. We only know that she was coaching the last year. She was probably coaching all 4 years with dementia.
Now, I was also told by a former Lady Ball, I'm not going to mention who it was, but, Pat was really good about having people over to her house, and she would even have the media during Selection Sunday over to her house, and she would make a home-cooked meal and that sort of thing. Pretty cool. But we love to eat. The media were fat. But I was told by somebody, she had a lot of former players over there, and at one point, they remembered, like in the mid to late 2000s, that they thought it was sleepwalking at the time, but she was walking around, turning all the lights on at 3:00 in the morning. And at the time, they thought it was just Pat being kind of quirky, but I think that was probably some of the earliest indications that she had an issue on. And I don't know if you've ever been through that, but I have. And with 2 grandparents. And with dementia, you can easily just chalk it up to getting older and not really get a clear diagnosis. But yeah, if she was that bad her last year, and I was told she was, then she probably had it 3, 4, 5 years.
Right. So forget just the last
but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
So forget what she could have done after she stepped down. Because remember, she led Geno 8-5 in titles when we believe she actually did officially get it, and it was affecting her. Even in those last 4 years, she probably gets at least one more national title. And that's not even a factor in what she could have done all the years after. So I think just the titles and numbers argument is just not fair to Pat at all because of how she had to step down.
Yep, that's fair enough. All right, Hot or Cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. Integrity matters over 50 years in East Tennessee. Cityheatandair.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All right, our last one. Geno has more titles in the era of greater parity. That's very true. And that might be the strongest one, the hottest one.
That's hot.
Of the entire one. Because the women's game over the past 7 to 10 years is way different than it was a decade ago. Caleb, there were 2 or maybe 3 teams that could win a national championship. Now I think it's pretty close to the men. I think it's 6 to 8, maybe 8 to 10 that can realistically win a championship on the men's side. It's much, much tougher to win a natty nowadays than before.
So Pat Summitt, and when Pat Summitt won her 6th national title, UConn had just one at that time. And that 6th one was the Shamika Holtzclaw, Samika Randall, that team that went undefeated and won it all. Right after that, you saw Geno really start to catch up because he used certain recruiting advantages that Pat Summitt didn't like. That's when he ended up winning 4 more. And then Pat Summitt got Candace Parker and then won 2 more to go up 8-5. Afterwards, she really wanted Maya Moore, and then she canceled the series with UConn because Geno used ESPN connections to get Maya Moore. Now, this is the best argument I would say in favor of Geno over Pat is the sense of, we talk about the era of greater parity. Geno really embraced new times in recruiting and kind of helped create them. And Pat really had a very strong feeling about how recruiting in women's basketball should be. And I think it was to the detriment of the Lady Vols to a degree. But Dave, I'll also add this. I'm not sure how much parity when Geno was really at his peak really existed in women's basketball. If you remember, UConn had a monopoly on recruiting for a long time. I mean, a really long time because of the ESPN tie. And by the way, as we know,
a long time. I mean, I felt like Maya Moore was significant and they beat Pat out for her. And there may have been a handful of other players, but I never felt like that UConn had a huge upper hand on the Lady Vols in recruiting. Did you? Not for an extended period of time.
I actually do. And I think it I think it started the minute, I don't know the exact year, but ESPN invested heavily in the women's NCAA tournament before women's basketball was a profitable thing. So ESPN carried it I think it was like the late 90s was when they started carrying it. I don't remember the exact year, but you can track it from right when ESPN started carrying the tournament to right when UConn really started recruiting well. And not only did they carry the tournament, Dave, ESPN consistently hired former UConn players to be analysts because it was right there, just the Bristol connection. And Geno used that to his advantage superbly. So from Pat Summitt's last national title in 98, until her retirement, Geno out-recruited her. The only time he didn't was when she landed Candace Parker, and he didn't. And by the way, Geno has been bitter against Candace Parker to this day over that. But he consistently out-recruited Pat Summitt for the best talent. And they had that monopoly. I'm going to go all the way through 2016. Now, it changed after that. That the increase in the women and interest in the women's game, you see what's happened. Dave, this is Geno's first national title in 9 years. Okay? The reason it's taken that long is because there is an increased interest in the women's game. He doesn't have the monopoly anymore. And also, ESPN is not the giant in sports that it once was because of cord cutting and streaming.
I don't think that going to ESPN has really any draw any more than going to the Twitter headquarters.
Yeah.
with you.
It's
David
not.
says conspiracy theory, but I think ESPN funneled money to the school to propel up the women's basketball for the network since Tennessee was the only school dominated. I don't know if they funneled it.
No,
but
they didn't funnel.
They opened
That
the
was
doors wide open.
Geno Auriemma pushed the ESPN connection. Like Tennessee has its own advantages. The Women's College Basketball Hall of Fame is in Knoxville. Geno was just he was smart in how he did it. I don't blame him for it. I mean, anybody else would do it if they had that advantage right there. And Geno,
I don't think Pat would have.
well,
It was a violation.
Right, but that was the problem with Pat. Is Pat still believed in these violations, and it's like you got to let that go. You got to use that to your advantage. And Geno definitely. I never minded Geno using the ESPN tie. I minded him holding a grudge against top players that didn't commit to UConn. Again, Candace Parker. He still is bitter that Candace Parker did that. But of all the great women's basketball players during that era, Dave, from like Pat's retirement, from Pat's 6th national title in '98, Candace Parker was the only transcendent player she got to commit to the program. Geno got the rest of them, from Diana Taurasi to Sue Bird to Maya Moore. You're right. And then Breonna Stewart later. I mean, he consistently was getting them. And I think Geno was going out of his way to use UConn's ties to ESPN, and ESPN was happy to reciprocate. I don't think Pat Summitt was doing that as much as Geno was. I mean, she did some. Pat Summitt was trying to promote, put it this way, and this is the best way to say it, Dave. Pat Summitt was trying to use ESPN to promote the women's game as a whole. ESPN, Geno Auriemma was using it to promote UConn.
We'll get to a couple comments on the message board, but first, wrap us up with that poll question we had earlier, and there's a new one if you can share that with us.
Should Pat have cheated more like Geno? Sorry, no, integrity matters, and yes, get the players.
And what was our last poll question? Where did that end up?
Which Tennessee basketball program is closer to a national championship? 64% say women, 35% say men. Dave, I'm going to push back.
Go ahead.
I'm going to push back on the should Pat have cheated more like Geno. Did Geno really cheat, or did he skirt the rules in a way that Nick Saban would have skirted the rules to get his best player?
Cheating. You can't take a player off campus to media conglomerate.
I mean, yeah, but like, what type of violation are we talking here? You know what I mean?
I think it's a slap on the wrist the first time. I think it's essentially what Bruce Pearl did. As long as you don't lie about it, then you're fine. Dylan says, I think there's a level of comfort with women learning under another woman that there isn't with a guy like Geno. Well, I don't think that Geno is ever going to do a Tyler Summitt or anything.
No. Geno's. I don't like Geno Auriemma for a lot of reasons. I don't think he's ever pulled a Tyler Summitt, guys. Not even close. I think
best way to produce players is have your own.
Yeah.
I got a new recruiting style. What is it? Missionary. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Okay. So look, Geno. We're going about. There's reasons to criticize Geno. His recruiting methods with ESPN is not one to complain about. And look, I'm sorry, guys. Pat Summitt was wrong for canceling the series. I don't know if you guys noticed this. Here's why UConn got the monopoly in recruiting, Dave. Pat Summitt was making a comeback because she was. Let's tell the full story here. Geno started to get a monopoly on recruiting because of the ESPN tie. Pat Summitt was actually making a pushback because she landed Candace Parker. Okay, so Pat Summitt was starting to even the playing field even in that era. What does she do? She nixes the series with UConn. That gives UConn the full monopoly on recruiting when it's just the Lady Vols and UConn during that time. Okay, so basically what could have been a split of talent between the Lady Vols and UConn all went to UConn. And then they went on an insane run in the early 2010s. That's not even close, where they won 4 straight national titles, had 3 undefeated seasons. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just like, I think Pat made a mistake canceling that series. I do. I think she made a huge mistake canceling that series. And I think it hurt Tennessee more than it hurt UConn.
I think the last part I would agree with, that it hurt Tennessee more than it hurt UConn. I don't think she necessarily made a mistake because she stood on her integrity, and I appreciate that. David says it's improper benefits like Pat taking a recruit to Dollywood, Caleb. Well, but okay, let's be for realsies here for a second. Could Pat not take players to the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame? I mean, how different is that?
She could. She chose not to. It was my understanding a lot of times.
Okay. Well, I mean, that seems like that would be analogous, would it not?
It would. And I think it was a mistake to not do it. I mean, this is the thing. Derek. Actually, Adam has the best point. That's how right. The WNBA being carried by ESPN, that helped prop up UConn because more than anything. And so well, that helped even things out. But like the WNBA also helped promote UConn to begin with, because the creation of the WNBA was an ESPN tie, and there were a lot of UConn people who would cover it during that time. So it kind of went back and forth. It's kind of like, for those who don't know, like Dave knows this, he worked at ESPN. One of the things that helped Big Ten programs for a long time in college football was so many of the best journalism schools are in the Big Ten. So how many ESPN reporters just came out of Big Ten schools, So
yeah, a lot came out of Florida too, for whatever reason. Andy
And-
Staples, the Jill Arrington.
Did you ever notice Florida got more promo in the 90s than any other SEC program?
Well, they deserved it.
I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, they did, but I also think that Florida got look, first of all, let's call it what it is, just to go way off on a tangent. Everybody loved an interview with Steve Spurrier. Him and Bobby Bowden, like those were the two best interviews. Are those the two best interviews in college football history, Dave? Those two guys?
They're pretty good. Pretty good. They're very honest. Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, you can't beat those two. So I would say that, like, and Jimmy Stack has a great point. Tyler was the head coach at Louisiana Tech, once the powerhouse of women's basketball. Yeah, there's no Louisiana Tech anymore. Those schools don't exist in women's basketball. Louisiana Tech will never have a women's basketball power again. Like, that's just a thing.
Well, I wouldn't totally rule that out. Why are you completely ruling that out?
Because women's basketball is going the route of men's and college football, where the Blue Bloods are going to be in the power conferences. Louisiana Tech is not going to be in the power conferences. And they were the biggest rival with the Lady Vols in the 80s.